much for coming here today. It is a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how this is going to go, and we'll get into it. I'm going to do a little talk about the work here. I'm going to focus on a couple of the pieces to kind of illustrate the thoughts that were going on. And then I am going to switch it over to asking some other artists who are in similar but different circumstances to answer some questions that came up for me during the production of this work and the point of my life that I'm in and that was important in making it. Love and Gravity was based on a question that a 4-year-old asked me 20 years ago when I was on a study abroad with the teacher's son. And he came up to my friend and I and asked, what's more important, love or gravity? And a big question for a 4-year-old, but that question really stuck with me. And my son is going to turn 4 in a month, or at the end of the month, 2 weeks from now. And it feels more weighty than ever and more resonant than ever to think about these two terms, love, which is light, levity, is really emotive, and then gravity, which is kind of the more rational side of life that grounds us, but gets us into our head and out of our heart a bit more. The experience of this past 4 years, and especially the last 2 years, has been really wonderful, but also really heavy for me. I live in Amsterdam. I used to live in Austin. We moved over there during the pandemic. I was just pregnant with my son. We went over there. I had him. 2 years later, I had my daughter. And it's been a really amazing journey, but also a really hard one. And especially over the last 2 years, it has just been compounded. And I've noticed that time has changed, space has changed, the way that I work and the ability to focus has really changed, and really has kind of become fragmented in a lot of ways. And instead of fighting it, I found a way to kind of allow all of it to exist and also allow it to nourish me in a way. It's changed how I approach starting a drawing and actually finishing a drawing. And I will talk about a few of them, like I said, to illustrate this. Prior to having children, I was a little bit more linear. I would come up with an idea, I would get started on it. It would evolve a little bit, but I could just kind of dump a lot of time and energy into it, whereas now the spaces are different. So instead of just coming at the drawing and trying to fix whatever I need to fix in the hour that I have, I do a lot of work now to change my mindset before I get into it. So even if like all week I haven't been able to do anything, I'll still take my kids to school. We might sneak and get a coffee or something. And that really feeds me so that when I get back in the studio, I'm actually in kind of a chill place and I can start to explore a bit more. The drawing over here by the door with the scratches on it is a nice example of this. This is a drawing that I actually started for my husband's birthday a couple years ago as something for his office. And Never Stop Exploring was actually on the pillow in our marriage counseling point. And I got my rulers out, I have my idea, I like mapped it out, and this drawing sucked, and it got worse and worse and worse the more I tried to fix it. And eventually I put another drawing on top of it, I let it sit. I have my daughter, and I started to really learn that I needed to let go of some preconceived stuff that I had. And through that process, that was actually the answer in the drawing. I was able to use erasers to remove the tightness in the drawing, and it just took over. It was like a freedom and emotion in my arm that just kind of like hacked the entire thing apart. And as it opened it up, it erased the words, it erased a lot of the foliage that was there. And it was almost like it was going through its own winter and it was getting composted, like all of the parts that didn't work, and they were kind of just becoming some fresh soil for what needed to come. And as that mirrored my experience that I was going through, colors started coming in, the flowers started happening, and it became actually fun to work on again, which was really refreshing. And I think that whatever is going on for us as artists in some way does get recorded in the work that you're making on the page. There's also little bits that are meaningful to me, like on the bottom right corner, there has been a collaboration with someone who is 2.5 feet tall, who has a marker. And I think that's really an important thing to just have kind of catalog on something that you're working on as your life expands for more people in it. Briefly talk about this one as well. The holes have seemed to come into my work several times over the course of my life when a big transformation is happening or is about to happen. This was starting from photographs that I had taken in the landscape in Texas, and I'd just been storing for one day. As I started to slough off and let go of things, the drawing starts to open up a bit more. It's definitely inspired by the Dutch paintings, the big compositions that I'm seeing at the Rijksmuseum and such. But the grasses are so important. This sense that like I'm creating this space where I can actually see where I am. And I think that's really difficult to do as a caretaker when every moment is like this Tetris game of trying to make sure everyone's needs are met. I think of it kind of like I'm Cinderella, like if I can just get all of these things done, there's going to be space for me to have my needs met. And it doesn't really work that way. It just like their needs just regenerate again. So anyway, with the drawings, they really did create spaces where I could see myself and allow myself and my femininity to kind of just be and to soften. And this series of drawings through doing that has been the softest work that I've ever done, and something that just feels in flow with the reality of life, which is not fixed, which is not in order, in control, but kind of ebbs. The stars were mirrored by the flowers, and we have a full moon tomorrow night, so I think this is an especially resonant full moon at the top. And yeah, I think that's enough for that introduction, but as I was asking these questions of myself, I don't want to come out and be like the making it like I have all of the answers. Actually, this whole process has given me a lot of questions. There's a lot of esoteric stuff that I have in my notes that I feel like I could talk about for a really long time. I get that. Yeah, I mean, what goes on in our heads is like we're figuring out the universe. All right, well, I'm going to switch over, though, because my panel's already here. As this is the situation in my life, and especially as the political climate that we're in, I think is also affecting us, I think it is important to talk about patriarchal systems and the way that they affect people, because I really do feel affected by it. There's a really amazing relational therapist named Terry Real, and I love his explanation or his definition for patriarchy, which is thinking we're separate from nature and that we can control it, even the nature within ourselves. And that's definitely something that I had tried to do before, and with this letting go, it's like, well, it is what it is. Like, we've got to let the drawings flow and find the space that we can with them. Control is more of a traditionally masculine element, and the softness and allowing is more feminine. It just seems like an uphill battle sometimes to get our needs met, and like believing sometimes that it's your fault that they're not. And I think there's a bit of gaslighting in that. I think I'm just going to move into the questions here. So, all right. I'm going to pause there and introduce my panel of artists. This is Jade Walker, Claire Oswalt, and Elizabeth Chiles. They are artists who are who are living in Austin and are working in a variety of practices, but are united through also being women, also being mothers, also persisting through their artwork, and I'm sure having their own challenges and transformations within. I wanted this conversation to be connective and really about the way that we transform through this caregiving, not necessarily so much that it's all the difficult stuff, but that it really nourishes and feeds us as well, and that we're making work now that we probably couldn't make prior to this. So without further ado, my panel. Thank you. Okay, so my kids are 1 and 3. How old are yours, everyone? I'll start with Elizabeth.
I just have one. She's 9, just turned 9.
Okay, Claire?
10 and 13.
Okay.
13, 11, and 6.
Okay, does it get easier?
No.
I've heard that bigger kids, bigger problems.
Yes. I would agree with
that.
I think it's easier.
Oh, really?
I think
yeah. I think that there is stages. We're in an easy stage right now, too.
Okay.
I'm like, really? It's amazing.
I think it's maybe the 3.
What can you guys answer? Like, you're artists, you're mothers, you're also people. Often forgotten.
Yeah.
What about being an artist makes you better at being a mother, and what about being a mother or caretaker makes you better at being an artist or informs it in some way? Do you want to start?
I don't know how to answer that. What about being an artist makes me a better mother?
Yeah.
I mean, okay. As everyone is diving more and more into identity these days, I feel like I'm diving out of identity. So I'm trying not to use words like artist and mother for myself. And I'm not trying to qualify even male, female, anything. I'm trying to recently, which we might get into, I've had an experience that was very much forced me into completely out of being human and what is this consciousness experience that my human body allows me to access. And in that conscious space, I had to forget all labels altogether. It was very intense. But anyway, that is the point that now I'm trying to get back to.
Yeah.
So my workflow, yes, I'm a person, I'm a human, I live in this world. And I have very much learned to adapt to, like, I'm working, I have this time, I got to stop, I got to go tend to my children. So I think you just become more adaptive, and, you know, you can quickly evolve from space to space. I think that's the easy answer. And then, yeah, like we could get into so many esoteric stuff. So I'll just stop there and let these women take over on their motherhood.
Well, I think the being a mom changed my work enormously. I mean, there's the schedule component, which is, you know, in a way, you know, it's the scaffolding or that sort of sets things up. But other questions just about, you know, moving from the research I was doing prior to motherhood, so much of it was about consciousness, so much about levels of perception, spaces, I think, of spirituality primarily, and then growing another person in my body and having another person to take care of. I was just incredibly interested in biology in a very specific way. So it changed just the relationship, the moving back and forth relationship of like this sort of cosmic connection that we have of things moving out and connecting all the way out, and then things like very localized, very specific, the needs that are immediate, and the care. And so I had been thinking, I guess, for many years about the macro and the micro, or the scales, of things moving in and out, and where's the connection between these scales. And I think, the more we know about things up close, and the more we know about things far out, we recognize that it's all the same material. But the research has definitely shifted. And then in terms of, I don't separate. My daughter knows exactly how I feel about the world. So like she hears about the things I'm interested in, and my friends come around and they have similar interests, and they tell her all about the world too. So she's influenced by a lot of artists, and their research.
I love these mini mics. They're so cute.
If we just leave the mics there, like, can you hear us if we don't have to hold it?
Okay, great.
So it feels kind of funny.
Okay.
I would say that being an artist has definitely made my ability to mother. I'm way more flexible. I'm way more able to think about things creatively, and we say that in my house all the time. Like, what's 4 creative ideas that are going to help you to solve this problem of why you have no lunch at school today? I mean, there's like these easy moments where I just think like my tactile relationship with materials also translates into being a better, parent in lots of ways. I also think that, that influence of having other artists and lots of art things around is changing the way that my children see things. In terms of the other way, I also feel like that connection back to the body. I mean, to grow a person in your body, to nurse that person for a year. I always start with the body in my practice anyway. It's always the kind of foundation for what I've always done. But once I knew what my nipples could do, I was like, these have to be in everything because they're amazing. And I sort of think I loved the body from a distance before, and now it's just completely visceral. And it continues to be that way in the work. And I mean, the last thing I'll say is that I feel like I've taken a drastic shift in the last 3 years where I do call my children collaborators on projects now, and I credit them with things. They gather materials. So in a logistic way, they install with me. All my lectures have images of them as part of my process now. So, but I tried to avoid that for so long, and now it's an embrace.
So it was like a resistance before.
Yeah. Like, I'm not a mom. It's cool. I'm just doing my same thing.
I mean, we talked about us as artists, how we are better mothers for our children, but you said, I honestly think there's been more influence going the other direction. And you were saying your children's lunches, and my kid played chess, and I sat with him through all his chess lessons, and I was like, this is so helpful for my brain to rework things. Like if I'm looking at a piece of work and how I can come at it from a different angle, or like 3 steps ahead. It was just, I was so impressed. I tried to tell his chess coach that. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then also I just created a collage yesterday, and my kid had been sitting in the studio and was rubbing charcoals. I don't even use charcoals. And here I am cutting up his piece and putting it into it. And I was like, that's so cool.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more of, I keep saying control, but it is like before kids, it's like you can leave something in your studio and it's still there.
Oh, yeah.
Really wild.
That's the name of the game. Control. That's everything.
Like cutting it off.
As you have kids, you learn to just completely let go and roll with things, and it comes out in the art. And that's my favorite piece.
Thank you. It was a lot of letting go. So I have a few questions for each of you, and in this work, I feel like I connected more to more people through the specifics of my personal experience, and that's kind of my intention, is that this may, through these personal experiences, connect on a broader scope too. We talked a little bit about weaving, and this was largely inspired by you, Jade. And I thought of, actually, all four of us really do have weaving in our process. Collaging, weaving through the photographs, physically weaving, weaving different images and ideas together. Esoteric stuff coming in as well. But for Jade, I'm really interested in this because you are physically weaving, but you're also a storyteller, and you seem to handle a level of chaos that I cannot, and I'm really interested in it. And maybe it's not chaos, but you're curating your own panels, your own boards, and so it's like you're weaving together a storytelling element through an entire community, but also at home with your kids. You're clear. I'm very much assuming that you're giving storytelling elements to them and helping them develop and grow, and then you're doing it in your physical practice as well. And I'm wondering how you tell stories through all of those roles, and what is that like with working really broad to specific?
And I guess sometimes I think material finds its way that way, on a very rudimentary level. There's some things that may start at home, end up in the studio. There may be materials and to me, they have their story already. I had a show with Jill last year with Margaret Meehan, and I love working with her. She's kind of the only person I've ever really collaborated with before. And something that was so amazing is we both agreed that we come to materials totally differently. For me, I'm excited to go treasure hunt and find something. I don't need to know where it came from. I just need to know what story it's telling me. And then I get excited about how to rethink it and tool it into what I'm thinking about. Whereas Margaret may have an idea about something. She's well, I have to go on Etsy or go buy this specific cocktail dress from 1860, whatever, because it plays right into my theme. And I love thinking about that, how materials really start the story. For me, they always start the story. So I do find that happening. I also find that I don't know how to kind of address that bigger thing. I'm just a curious person, I guess. And so I like thinking about how storyline, I am infatuated with how I can tag in with Ney now that I'm at the Elizabeth Ney Museum, or I love finding how other characters in the community do those things together. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I feel like the story part for me, maybe I would take it down to the grassroots of a material.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a material and just a intuitive connection, or
or a feeling on it. And then I think the kid piece is so crucial in there because I think we've talked this before, Elizabeth, how when Marigold comes home and she has some interesting thing to say, you're like, what I've been doing means nothing. You are so smart. You have this totally different, optimistic, eyeball opening look at the world, and I just want to jump into you, So I find that happening a lot in my thinking about stories now too.
Are you playing off of that? I feel like you have some.
I was just enjoying thinking about that. Thanks for bringing that in. Yeah. No, it gives me something to look forward to and a focus in the studio. We're talking about letting go, of course, a lot, which is certainly a part of what I experience as well. But I feel like there's a heightened focus. I'm very protective of my time, and I have a serious routine. The morning routine is everything is very ritualistic and completely, I'm not bendable about it. It's my time. And so then my work, I go into the studio between 9 and 10 after having done 3 or 4 very important things for myself already. And then I work until 3, and then I get so excited because I know she's coming home. And then I'm so excited to hang out with her. And then after about 45 minutes, I'm okay. I'm oh my God, this is so intense. Yeah. And so then I'm like, okay, no, I guess it's like the next phase of work, right? We all have that. It's like then the next phase of work, which equals like what's for dinner and like all the other things that have to be done, you know, all the laundry and all that other stuff. But I think that if before I had Marigold, I think I just like stretched things out. Like I just stretched things out. I had a very hard time with like, you know, boundaries about my time, and I wasn't protective in the same way. So I explore the world differently. But your question about weave, which I think is really important. I now have had like 4 bodies of work, which is like stretched over like 10 years that have all been about the weave. And for me, it's, I think of the weave as about interaction is what I'm interested in collaboration. That when we experience something, it's affecting us. Every experience we have affects us, right? And we also affect that experience. Could be thought of in like quantum physics terms, or it could be thought of in very like physical terms, material terms.
On the same page.
Absolutely. So I mean, it's interesting in photography specifically, which is like could be a very didactic medium about like looking out and sort of framing something and having authority over it. That's been something I've worked against for 25 years. And the weave, or like integrating multiple photographs together and thinking about something unfolding over time, making more present my own sculpting of an experience, shifting of an experience, and also how it's affecting me. And so I'm thinking about the work that's created as having present both myself and the thing on the other side, which of course, for all of us, whether you're making a weaving or not, I personally think that's the case, is that you're changing the thing when you look at it, and it's changing you when it's being looked at. So that collaboration is something I find to be like a truth, if you will, that's in the world. And then it's just a playground for me in terms of thinking about how those weavings are happening in any moment. So that's where I'm coming from with that.
Really a strong relationship, or like channeling of that relationship, it sounds like, in the work. Well, okay. So thinking on that, the physical part. I don't know. This one's for Claire. You know, you're working in. I'm not exactly sure about like exactly how your process goes, but from my impression of it, it seems like there are a lot of painted elements that then get collaged together through sewing to create this larger. Because it feels like a painting, like a traditional painting when they're completed, but the process is different, and it just reminds me of like the fragmented attention or time, but like how all of those little fragmented pieces do come together to create something that's rather magical. At least that's been my experience of it. Can you speak to this, or like something else? Like, is there something within you that like helps you create the magic of all those fragments kind of coming together in one, or like the process? How does it go down?
Like I said, letting go is the name of the game, and trust. I mean, because exactly what Elizabeth was saying, we are affected by everything. I am wowed by the moment that I am dealing with these materials that are a collection of things that I created possibly 2 years ago, and then maybe 1 minute ago, now exist together, is kind of this microcosm of idea of that we are 13.8 billion years of existence, where how did I get to this moment where all free will and choice and all these possibilities going to quantum physics brought me to this? And I'm like, how am I now choosing this thing to put in this moment and make a connection? Where, like you said, I mean, we're talking about fragmentation beyond our fathoms. like it's not even possible. So how did I get to this point? And I'm so wowed by that like everything is an individual on its own. And here I am creating what I hope to be is a symphony of like, if you take that idea. And then my job from there is to put literal seams of where these fragments existed, but now as a blend of losing that fragmentation. So, yeah, that's what I would have to say about it.
Something gained and something lost.
Yeah, it's all about this like opposition existing together. The push and the pull of the weaving, the sewing is on a constant pull, but then you're drawing it together.
Do you feel like your heart is like expanded when these pieces all come together, or broken, or both? Like, what's emotionally going on?
Like
there?
The best part of my process is creating I don't know what I'm going to make when I sit down to make those collages. And so I feel like such a sense of wonder and discovery. Like, again, how did that happen? So I would definitely say like that harmonious love is happening more than a breaking down.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's nothing better, honestly. There's nothing better than that moment. Yeah.
I love that. And for you, like, where does play come into your work? I mean, when your time is completely filled, I think it's really difficult to get into play. Like, it sounds like you have clear boundaries in the beginning of the practice to allow for that. Like, today, everyone else's energy stops here at 9 a.m. and this is mine. How does play come into yours?
I do feel like I try to set aside. I mean, I have nothing like that. You're awesome. Like, that's awesome. My day is definitely not. I definitely don't feel like
you work out at like 5 in the morning.
Yes, but I don't feel like I have that good like studio. Like, I don't feel like I know that I'll be at the studio at a certain point. I feel like sometimes like the weeks don't flow like that for the 5 of us. It kind of does. I mean, I get to see Erin like once a week on Wednesday. I usually end up here on Wednesdays, but like it feels to me like allowing myself. I have like the only routine that I do adhere to, and I've since graduate school, is like walking into the studio. I have to sweep, and then I have to put on the apron, and there's like that kind of ritual that happens that kind of changes me into the next step, which I'm sure we all have that in some way, whatever that thing is, even if it's just turning off a phone or turning on music or like whatever. But I think what happens is that I do give myself this first part of being in the studio, even though I have that laundry list, because that's part of what you have to know you're doing when you're taking care of other people's. These 3 things have to get accomplished today when I get in that studio. So, but I do let that first half an hour just be tinker. Like, I guess tinker and play they interchange for me, but that tinkering part where do these 2 objects that I've been putting on the table and moving around, do they actually fit? Oh, they fit like this now today. Like it looks like blocks, like playing with blocks sometimes in the studio for me for that first little bit. And then new relationships happen, and then I get stoked about them, and they like keep going there, or I may just leave. There's some pieces that have been sitting there for like 2 years, like a block of stone and a block of blah blah, and they sometimes get painted and then scraped and then sewn into something. So maybe the tinkering happens for me like upon arrival. And then the ideas, I always feel like there's something that's, those ideas. I'm tinkering with ideas in my head too, maybe, but it does not until I get in there.
What about like all your camping trips and those things? I feel like I've learned a lot from your practice over the years, from especially during the pandemic, of like the adventures that you take your kids on, and it seemed like seeing you gather sticks out at camping trips, or like just feeling like this is ways that you can teach your children, have experiences with your children, and also get materials for your work, like while you're out doing things. And I would feel like you just like your whole life you're just playing. You're like
maybe you're right, a little bit of that. We camped for Thanksgiving, and we found this amazing stash of beaver gnawed wood, and I felt like I hit the jackpot. And so yes, everyone was sent out to gather all the beaver sticks. So we got them, and they're all in the studio now. So I mean, I guess there is that. I guess.
And I also feel like that, like, does this resonate with you guys too? Is that like when I get the most done when I have nothing to do. Like if I have nothing that I'm actually need to be doing, I actually finally grow. Because it's like I don't know, there's just space because this, I love when you talked about the holes in your work or like that space. I don't know, that seems like when like that's where play is for me. It's like when you're not expecting it. And you're just like, oh, I'm not doing anything. And then you're like curious, you finally like just like curious.
I wonder about you, Rachel, just because your kids are the youngest out of all of us, and I don't feel like I was like nearly as productive as you are when my kids were that little.
Am I productive? I don't feel it.
Yeah, look at this face. You are productive, but I wonder. I mean, how does?
I feel like I clean the kitchen a lot. Like, why is it dirty again?
Is your studio outside of your living space?
No, it's all at home, so we're just
hard.
Yeah. I mean, they know that they're not allowed in, and they kind of aren't allowed in, but also I really love it when they find their way in too. So I don't want them to like move stuff or break stuff or like, I mean, it's like when they find a marker, it's like, how I don't hid all the markers. Like, where did you find this marker? But for the most part, I don't know. It's kind of great. Like I knew we were moving to a new country, and like I just knew that there was no way that I would ever get to the studio if I didn't live where I was working. And so like, in the middle of the night, you can go in there, or like you guys said, the collection of books is great because when you don't know what you're doing, you're like, cool, like Sofia Coppola film stills, awesome. Like this is great. Or like a color that you see, or I underline exhaustively and ruin every book that I read. All of these important notes. I take the notes on the drawings, but you can kind of just leaf back through and find something, and it's really nice. But if it was out, it just would seem like so intentional, and the kitchen's not there, and you have to be really prepared.
I feel like you just need to know that this is part of your journey as an artist.
Yeah.
Like even though you might not be making at the speed you want to be making, like it is part of it. You know this.
It's
and so
very
you tell
important.
yourself that, but you can intellectualize it, but it's hard not to get frustrated.
Yeah, or like see what part of like it all feels like kind of a hero's journey. Like you're going through this transformation, and there's trials, and then you just can't see the end yet. But I think the transformations. I just don't always feel like motherhood is quite as celebrated as it should be, or parenthood or caretaking is as celebrated as it should be in art in general. And I think it's, for me at least, has been such an important transformative process of like sloughing off. And when you have like an open hand, anything can go into it. And there's something really like playing in the studio when you don't have something you have to be doing. Like anything can land in there, and it's really exciting.
I'm really curious just because I can remember when first having kids, I felt like, oh, right, I just need to make sure this is very separate. Like I had loved artists that did work that really pulled their journey, especially like in the 70s, that pulled their journey into the studio. But I always felt like that's just probably not how I'm going to practice. And I remember thinking like even though I was infatuated with things like, the things you put in your bras to help you not leak through everything. And they came in the studio and went back out, and they keep, finally I was like, no, that this is just too weird. I'm not going to make work about this. But now I feel like it's now being like 10 years or 15 years later from when I first had kiddos, now I do feel like there is a glory to it, and women are talking about it. I'd never feel like it's enough, but it is being talked about in a way. I mean, I always go back to like the Catherine Opie image. That's like a crucial image. I remember feeling different after seeing that image of them nursing and thinking like, oh, right. So there's like moments where I feel like it doesn't have to be so loud now. And I wonder if you all feel that way as well, if it feels like it's an accepted part of other artist work that you like, or if you just...
I don't know. I feel the same. I feel like, I don't know. I don't love things anyway that are too overt and on the nose. I get tired of it. So, I like as long as I'm ready for some poetic kind of artistry around motherhood. But yes, a powerful image like that is incredible on its own. I mean, it doesn't even, it can allude to motherhood or not.
Yeah.
It's a breastfeeding a child, which, like you said, going back to biology is pretty incredible. Just like good art.
It doesn't. You're trying to sort of think it's not that messaging is not maybe what is attracting.
I mean, I love the discussions about this, and I really do, because I find them so helpful on an individual level. Just as artists who are out here, like, how do I get through this? I do, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to pass it on to you. I don't want to be cynical in any sort of way, you know?
I did not think that was cynical at all. I don't think anyone did.
Good.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I was thinking about a few things. One is, I think for myself that my work, I'm always interested in my own consciousness and perception, right? To start with, and if I'm collaborating with the world, I'm bringing something to it. So if I'm different from being a mother, to your point about it's more poetic, it's more subtle, it's an interior space. My interior space has definitely shifted from all the relationships that I have, and certainly one of the strongest, if not the strongest relationship I have is with my daughter. So I'm different than I was before. That's in all of my work, to your point. Every artist's consciousness is in their work, period, full stop. Right? So when we look at someone's work, we're just getting to know them. What are they thinking about? How do they see the world? What's going on here? So every woman who's, every parent, every father, that is in their work. Every mother, that is in their work. I don't necessarily feel the need all the time to make my work about that. At the same time, I never, like everyone who knows me knows, I'm like talking about my daughter all the time. And it's very, very forward. Andrea?
She just entered your work explicitly for the first time.
Yeah, so I have my first portrait, and she's, of course, it's her. It's up in my show in Houston right now. But that happened like very spontaneously, and now it's like the show could not exist if the show has a huge amount of work in it. So 40 pieces or something. Wow. She's in it's like she's sort of front and center, not intentionally. You don't walk in and say, oh, there's one portrait and everything else is something else. But if I take that picture out, there's something completely missing. And I would think it might be similar to how figure works in your work, like how you don't always have a figure, but do you do a whole show without a figure? What's the relationship of like actually grounding it back to the body and to that dialogue that I'm constantly having with her? Now it's like present, but she's in there. But
I have to say, I don't know if you saw, Jenna Gribben she has a show up now, I think in LA at David Kordansky, and she was the first time, instead of drawing her partner, she painted her child, and she talks about it, saying it's the most psychedelic thing I've ever done outside of any drugs. And I was like, oh, you're having a real experience with your daughter. I was just,
That's great. I don't know. Did you read an article about her? You saw the show? Or
I haven't seen the show. I just keep seeing it here and there. People talking about it. And she's been talking about being a mom and talking about having a child and how wild it is. And I'm like, I want to go into this wildness that you're experiencing.
It wasn't that long ago that I read an article in the New York Times that was, I feel like Tracy Emin was like the main center point. Did anybody else read this? It was like about how she did not have kids, and like there was no female artists were having kids, and it was like the thing that you absolutely did not want to do if you wanted to be a serious artist. And then, I mean, she's a different generation than we are, but not by much, and it's kind of like, it feels like there is a shift. I would just say that I think there is a shift. I don't know exactly when that happened. And I want to reread that. I will reread that article and remember like what exactly was being talked about there. But that was within the last 5 years. And I think it was, that position was still sort of talked about as like a real thing. I would say the biggest component is time, right? It's just like for all artists, because of the financial component, that we, you got to make money to live, and then you don't have time if you have a full-time job. So obviously, when you have a child, the main thing is that it takes up a lot of your time. And so I would say for any artist, male or female, having children is a challenge for that reason. But that's where I think that like contemporary partnerships are so interesting. Like dads play such an interesting role. And to your point about like just your own interest about like not thinking about yourself as like, I'm the mom and this is the dad. It's like, we're a family, like we're figuring this out. Here's the parts. Like we're gonna need you to do this. Yes, you can't breastfeed, and no, I maybe can't lift this tree or whatever. But like, we're like, you know, we love each other, and like it's gonna get messy, you know, and those things. But I don't know if that's like, if it is all related to where we are with gender, or if it's like. But in a way, I think that there's a lot of hope there for like, you know, a shift. But I think, you know, some of that's just subtly coming in. I don't know.
I agree. I feel it too. I feel it with artists that I visit with too, you know, and people that I did shows with pre-children and now they have a child. That I always think is very interesting to talk with a person who, I mean, to see the difference in the practice, because like Diane Al Hadid, I remember when it was all just big sculpture pieces and post-child. I'm like, there's a lot of 2D work now because that's so much easier in some ways for her, you know, in terms of the wrangling and
my work,
you know,
quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it before?
Like
now?
Photorealistic graphite drawing.
That's interesting.
And then I had kids, and I was like,
I'm holding on for dear life.
I mean, I had a real turn of things that happened when I had my second child, and I had, I spent, you know, a month plus on one drawing, and I thought, that's just not going to work. I mean, I got lucky, I think, in discovering my new medium, and I don't know if you want to hear that story, but I was also going to say the artists of the 90s were still having so much. They were having to push back so hard and just to be seen. Yeah. And I, when I had children, the first thing I did was Google my favorite artists to see how many children they had, if they had children. And then I read 9th Street Women, where, what's her name? The one that left her child with her parents.
Oh, Frankenfeller?
No. Grace Hardigan.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and she's like, you keep my child. I'm giving this up because I need to go make art. I had that very much, right? I have to make something. It was a compulsion I had. And luckily, I had a husband. And with my second one, we were like, we're shelling it all out for a bit of a nanny. So I could go to a studio for 3 hours, you know, to go make something. I didn't even really know what I was going to make. There's a lot of risk there, you know,
And
but
trust.
and trust. Yeah. I mean, that's it.
And so, but you wobbled through, and when did it start to like, I mean, it just seems like well, I don't know how to say it. First of all, I haven't seen your photorealistic graphite drawings, but like, I'm kind of glad that it all got up in the air because like the pieces you're making are so gorgeous and I really love looking at them. That really must have been a wobbly process though. Like how did it like start to
wobbly all the way? I mean, there was no grounded moment where I was like, no, I mean, at some point it was like, aha, I've got it. But it was long, it was arduous, it was a lot of second guessing. It was a lot of me coming home. I'm sure us as artists anyway, you're already going, this is terrible. Why did I even do this? And then you have the next moment, you go into your studio and I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Isn't there a meme like that where you're
I
like,
don't know.
this is okay, this is awesome. Oh God, this is shit. I'm shit.
Yeah. I feel so bad for
happening?
partners of artists. So bad. I don't know. I think I just, you know, just little notches on your belt where you're just gaining more and more confidence in your process and what you're doing. My process is everything to me. I can rely completely on it. And you know, I have deadlines years down the road and I have nothing made for that. And you just sit down and you're like, gee, I hope something happens. You know, I have no idea. But I think you become so much more comfortable with your process, and that you rely on it and you're like, it's going to come, it's going to happen. That's what I do, is I channel something. And I think you get out of that like profession idea and realize you are a vessel of some kind and you're channeling something. You're like, okay, I'm just gonna, who I am, I trust in that.
Yeah.
And your kids get bigger and they are more independent, and in some ways. I mean, I guess when I was shaking my head that it was easier right now, I mean, we're going through puberty at our house, so life is not easy. Like, it's like a different jam altogether. So don't think it gets easier, but I do think it just gets different, you know?
Yeah.
Now you're not so infatuated with getting home before your boobs bust because you need to nurse somebody.
I'm really glad that's over.
Yeah, me too. But instead you're like, is that person going to be where he's supposed to be when I go pick him up? I don't know. So it's different. Yeah, and maybe that feeds into like the kind of freedom you have in the studio as that tether changes. For me, I know at least the practice changes a bit too, and my trust in it changes. It's like there is a connection to that tether, I think. For me. Everyone feels that. But.
Yeah. I mean, I can start to dream about like travel at this point for the first time.
Yeah.
We just go dive right into it, and it's if anyone needs tips, I can help you with traveling with children. I have a lot of tips. But no, one thing that really I do agree with though in all of this is that like the trust of being able to channel something is so strong right now that I kind of take it for granted. It's just like, I don't know. I've heard that having babies is lucky, and there was a lot of it where I'm like, where's this luck coming in? I'm not seeing it. But as far as like these ideas or inspirations or new processes and new ways of doing things, or a belief that this will work out, I'm just gonna do it because that was my idea. That is really strong and has become a very fluid part of what I'm doing, at least.
Yeah. That warrior thing. I mean, to birth a child, it does feel like when I was done birthing children, like I can do anything at all. You know, this is And there's less things that make me feel scared. After that process.
There's one of the things I was thinking of. I wasn't sure if I was going to mention, but my husband's back there. He'd probably laugh at me. But there's this new movie that I really want to watch. Night Bitch.
Yes. My sister and I were just talking about this.
I know. We need to like have like a group viewing of this. I just started the book and it's really good. But the movie version is with Amy Adams, and she's an artist, and she ends up becoming the stay-at-home mom because her partner's the higher earner, and she's like, okay, it's gonna be okay, and she has a complete identity crisis because of it, and but like she's kind of like destroyed in this process, but like her feminine, like deep wolf woman like thing is coming out, and she is also kind of going nuts from it and like thinking that she's actually becoming a dog. And she's talking to her mom friends, and there's this great quote where she's like, do you ever think that the big secret is that we're gods? We're fucking creating life. We're making life. We're so powerful. I bet men are terrified of us. And then you think like, okay, God, dog spelled backwards is God, but for female dog, it's bitch. It's night bitch. So it's kind of interesting. Night bitch. Yeah, it's my recommendation. No, again, haven't seen it, but the first chapter of the book is really good. It's really good. We're getting to the end of time, and I just wanted to ask if anybody has any questions. I can have one. Anybody?
So you've all been talking about a lot of the positive aspects of having kids and how it's impacting your work and how you have to manage that. I'm wondering, some of you have some older kids. You still have a new one, right? But my thought is, how does their negative attitudes as they get older impact what you do?
Well, a lot of negativity in a 13-year-old, but actually, maybe I'm going to reverse this, and maybe I'm just being too optimistic here again. But I'm working on a series right now, and post-election, my kids are really outdoor. We homeschooled for a bunch of years, and they go out to this like Earth Native place, and so. But I've noticed since the election, I'm sure it's the angst in our house. They've been building all these weapons. They build them out of they are kind of weapony kids anyway. Emma can speak to this with her kiddo. Like Earth Native kids are kind of this. But oh my gosh, I'm collecting these. I probably will be showing them in the show I have in July at Marfa, just because they're fabulous. They're so. There's something so their angst about where we are right now is coming out when I walk through the backyard and see puddles of these crazy swords that are made from all of these things. And so maybe I'm going to reverse the angst and say, even though their negativity sometimes is them like wanting to build these things and hit each other and we're all stressed out, they're kind of also gorgeous symbols of like what this new generation is living through. Yeah, I'm sure you had a lot of weapons.
Weapons all over.
That's all it is. Yeah. The girls are, Minna, her weapons are the best ones. They're like a bunch of bones, and then it's like wrapped in pink tape, and then she writes Minna across it. You all will see it. I'm definitely showing that story. So maybe the negativity, I'm just trying to finesse it in the studio. Their negativity.
I do my studies. I try to work at home for my studies, and that started during COVID too. But we have a big dining room table, and I clear everything off, and then it just becomes like for a full week my space. So the kids come home, and there are balls being thrown back and forth over, and I deal with 30 pieces that are very specifically put in one spot, and I have all these paperweights and. But I learned, and that was what was so great about working at home, I try not to treat the negativity any different other than a calling for help or positivity, because it forces me away from the table, which at first I was really annoyed. I was like, I'm in this. Oh, I have to go over there. And so I was annoyed. But then when I came back, it was like all of a sudden I saw what I was doing differently. Mm-hmm. And so I started to love the little breaks. And that's the same way with like shifting energy, even through negativity, where I was like, oh, it's just a shift. It's just energy. You can look at it how you want to look at it. And so, yeah. And then, so I try to pull it in with the other emotions.
You have to run. You have a minute or two, or do you have to go?
Yeah, I think I need to go.
Okay.
Yeah. I have somewhere I have to go. But you guys continue. Thank you for having me, Rachel.
We're just going to stop Thank you. I'm just going to answer one question and then ask you two one quick thing. Yes,
I have one question.
Okay. Go.
I have kids, and they're part of the practice in the sense of the best critics. How do you guys feel about their criticism? Because they know you better than anybody else. They pay attention to all your moves, how you move, and how you move through things. And they see subtle things in your work that you find that with
Can I start? You can start. Go ahead. I'm like trying to think about the things they say about
I love license criticism. Like it's my favorite, and I go to it before my husband because they innately have a sense of composition and color that is so raw, and that they just see it and they're like, easy, done, that one. Like, don't even give this a second thought, which I just love. It's so raw. And then also Mom, this looks like a butt, this looks like a penis. Yeah. This is like, and sure enough, I just had a painting sent back to me.
Too much penis?
Yeah, someone in the gallery said, someone made a comment. It's slightly looking like a penis. God damn it, Hagen, you were right. That is so funny. I just think, like, if you want to sell a painting, ask a kid. Yeah. Commercial value. So funny.
No, I don't know. My kids are like, why aren't you going to put this other thing in it? Like they have questions about like putting more in, but I don't think I get like direct enough feedback from them. I think they're very much like, it looks great. When can we move on? You know, like now Charles, I'm tempted to like, yeah, sit them down in a more direct way. I'm sure Minna will be ready to tell me her thoughts because she's a different breed than the boys. But.
Very kid specific. My kids are not.
No, I'm sure Zora's like, no, don't do that anymore. That's not good for you.
That's
Well, mine are like telling me, well, does a little bit here and there, tell me what he likes and what not so much. But what I've really gained is like, we'll be at the table and we're painting and we're like, okay, I'm going to make a painting, you're going to be painting. And I just realized what an idiot I am about painting. I'm like, my God, I have like 2 degrees in this and I know nothing. He just like takes out all the little finger paints and he gets a different brush for each one. But those brushes don't stay in each color. They come out and then he's like, screw the brushes. And he's just dumping it and he's like a forearm painter. So he's just and then he's making roads with his fingernails. I'm like, and then we hang them up and it looks so much better. It's like this layered brown glittery goo with like these big motions, and I don't know. It through that it teaches me that okay, like yeah, this one's not done or this one went too far, or I just need to like do something weird, and it's very wise.
Well, plus you have kids that are not verbal yet. That's so cool in that zone.
Yeah,
you know.
They're pretty verbal. He's getting there.
Yeah.
He is. She's more of a commander.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask this one last question. Someone asked on Instagram if we ever experience other art professionals, male or female, attempting to diminish or undermine the work as a result of it being tied to parenthood. And this is good because we've talked about a lot of like the inspiring aspects, but reality of it. At one time, being able to have children in a career was laughable, and this person was literally laughed at. And they're curious if the cultural landscape of the contemporary art world has matured to be genuinely inclusive of mothers in particular, or not. What are y'all feeling?
Wait, are you saying that someone's asking, like, because the work alludes to their motherhood, they're diminishing it because it's motherly based?
I guess like I'm not sure, but like the work being tied to parenthood versus like having to conceal or separate that part of your life. Like if it's more connected, that would be, like a
negativity.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
not you.
I mean, like we said earlier, I do think it's changed. The landscape's changed. It's accepted differently. I mean, I think that especially about fiber art in general, like the real embrace of fibers in the last 5 to 10 years, male and female and non-binary, all in between. I think that is beautiful that has been accepted. But in early parts of my career, definitely like working in fabric was a very isolating thing. And speaking of penis, I remember having a show one time where I had these objects that had little penises, and this guy walked in and he was like, "Oh, you're the artist, aren't you?" Like, yes, I am. What makes you think? And he's like, "These penises are all too small." And I was like, "Oh, okay, so okay." But so I think there is an innate like want to sort of like not only give a binary gender moment to works that based on materiality.
You call him a dickhead.
Yeah.
I think there's some very good one-liners in there for that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's changing. I notice it when I go to do studio visits that it's changing. That artists feel more liberated to talk about their children and how it works into their practice.
I've never had it be part of the conversation.
Really?
I mean, not when in an opening or talking to someone about my work. It doesn't come up, honestly. Personally, I feel a need to, when I step out in New York and I'm on the scene, I'm like, I'm not wearing my mom jeans.
Right.
I'm not channeling my mother. So, yeah, I mean, I feel very much that pressure, but I think that's just a pressure of like what the art world is looking for. They want, they're looking for young and cool and hip and da da da. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth.
So more of like a desirable formula that you're trying to like. Or...
Yeah, I mean that's my personal thing. But no, I haven't had it come up that often.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The only last thing I wanted to know is, are there any other artists, makers, writers, filmmakers, whatever, who are bringing these different aspects of their life together that we should know about that might not be on our radar?
I love listening to Shiro's Radio. I don't know if you're a Shiro's Radio person, but I love that show, and I listen to it like all the time. And I loved, she interviewed Santa Gold, and she talked about her experience traveling with twins.
Oh wow!
And working through her, like, I actually have been loving listening to like young mother musicians and how they've incorporated their children into their touring and the logistics. I mean, that's a world I don't really understand nearly as much, but. So I don't know. I think it's kind of cool to think about who you're like jamming to and thinking about if behind stage there's like a set of twin 2-year-olds. Like, it's kind of interesting to me to think about.
Yeah. Do you have one on top of mind or?
No, I mean, I can't think of anyone that's like, oh, y'all don't know about, I mean, I immediately thought of Patti Smith because, and what is it, M Train or just Kids, where she talks about meeting her musician husband and then leaving and having kids, and she M Train, and she left and lived in Detroit. I mean, like completely quit making music and writing poetry. Well, she was probably writing, but wasn't in the public eye. And to me, that idea of being okay with knowing that it might come back at some point in her life, but this point was dedicated to family, I was pretty impressed. I was like, I don't know how you did that. That's very neat. And I remind myself that, like, I might need a dip.
I do have one show to recommend.
Yeah.
It's in Chicago, though, but online, the work of Paula Modersohn Becker is fantastic. It's an amazing show, and it has a lot to do with her own body and motherhood and all of that done in the.
Awesome.
It's an
Thanks,
amazing
Charles.
show. At the Art Institute. Online, they have a lot of it.
There's a photographer. Oh, I love her. One of my favorite artists to watch.
Who's the artist? She was in the Blanton show not that long ago, but she did the motherhood residency during pandemic. I also love. I mean, I loved her. I love the objects that she creates, but I love the framework. I don't know if anyone do that during pandemic. Do the residency.
I'm doing a mentorship.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, that residency component. I don't know if anyone walked through it, but like she set it up and basically gave you the infrastructure. So I applied for it, and then I just had this residency where it was just, but it's all mandated on your own. She's just this beautiful like framework of motherhood residency. I think that's very cool that you get to work with her. I have so many questions for her.
Yeah, it's something that she offers. So if you go to her website.
Yeah. I love that way of working socially as well as with objects, because her objects are beautiful too.
Lenka, Lenka.
Well, thank you all so much for coming and joining us in this, and thank you too so much
for the invitation,
for
Rachel. It's nice.
sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I highly recommend that you check out Jade and Claire and Elizabeth's work. It's very moving and important for me, and thank you.
way about yours too.
Thank you.
Are your little people here?
My little Korean.
That was so fun. Thank you for that. Of course, I have all questions for you on my